The parking garage beneath the Elysium was a concrete tomb, cold, damp, and smelling of old exhaust and wet cement. 2 levels up, the bass from the nightclub thudded through the soles of my shoes. A mechanical heartbeat for a party I was desperate to avoid. My name is Ivy Caldwell. I am 29 years old. I am a forensic research assistant, which is a polite way of saying I dig through the digital trash of bad people for a living, all in the name of civil rights. Tonight, I was not looking for truth. I was just prey. I pressed my back against a support column, my breath clouding in the chilled air. My lungs burned. I could taste the copper tang of blood in my mouth from where I had bitten my lip raw. He was here. Kyle, the tattoo artist with the charm of a poet and the temper of a cornered dog. My ex-boyfriend. The man who treated the restraining order I filed as a piece of sentimental correspondence. He had made bail this afternoon, and now he was hunting me. I risked a glance around the concrete pillar. He was standing by the main elevator bank, his thick neck craning as he scanned the rows of parked cars. He was bigger than I remembered, or maybe the fear just magnified him. He was yelling into his phone, his voice a low, angry rumble that echoed in the enclosed space. I needed an exit, but he was blocking the only one I knew. My eyes darted, scanning for another way out, and that is when I saw it. Tucked into a ceiling joint, a dark plastic dome with a small, black lens. A tiny red light winked at me. Once, twice. A security camera? We were being watched. Kyle was watching me, and someone else was watching him. A cold, desperate spark of an idea ignited in my chest. It was the kind of plan only true panic can forge. Kyle respects one thing, and one thing only: power. He's a bully. If he thought I was not alone, if he thought I was with someone more dangerous than him, he would hesitate. He would back down. The bell for the other elevator, the one leading to the private suites, chimed. The door slid open with a whisper. A man stepped out. He was tall, and he wore a black suit that was cut so perfectly it seemed to hang on him by its own gravity. He did not look left. He did not look right. He just moved, walking with an unhurried confidence toward the exit ramp, toward Kyle. As he passed under one of the flickering fluorescent lights, I caught his scent. It was not cologne. It was the sharp, clean smell of the rain he had just walked through, mixed with expensive mint tobacco. This was it. It was a stupid, insane, movie logic kind of choice. It was the only one I had. I moved before my brain could file a formal protest. I launched myself from behind the pillar and grabbed the front of his jacket. The fabric was heavy wool, impossibly smooth beneath my fingers. He stopped instantly. He did not flinch. He did not startle. He simply stopped. And he looked down at me. His eyes were dark, unreadable in the poor light. I was clutching the lapels of a complete stranger. A man who looked like he could snap me in half without wrinkling his shirt. My voice came out as a ragged whisper. "Kiss me." He raised one dark eyebrow. "He's watching," I forced out, nodding toward Kyle. The man did not ask who. He did not ask why. He did not threaten me or push me away. He simply lowered his head. One of his hands came up, not to grab me, but to gently cup the side of my face, his thumb brushing over the cut on my lip. His touch was shockingly warm against my cold skin. And then his lips were on mine. It was not a rough kiss. It was not the angry, possessive kiss of men like Kyle. It was slow, deliberate, calculated. It tasted of mint and of the metallic tang of my own blood. It felt impossibly like an apology. His other hand found the small of my back, and he pressed me firmly against the cold, rough concrete of the pillar, shielding me with his own body. He was solid rock. I heard the footsteps. Heavy boot falls on gritty concrete. They stopped. "What the hell?" Kyle's voice snarled, vibrating with rage. I kept my eyes squeezed shut, my hand still fisted in the stranger's suit. "Ivy," Kyle spat the name. "You ditch me for this piece of, The stranger did not break the kiss. He did not look up. He just shifted his head slightly, a fractional movement, and I felt the gaze he directed past me. The air in the garage changed. The temperature seemed to drop. Kyle's bravado, so loud and terrifying moments before, simply evaporated. I heard him mutter a curse, low and acidic. "Forget it. She's not worth it." The footsteps retreated. They were fast. He was heading for the stairwell. He was gone. The man pulled back slowly. His eyes, up close, were the color of dark coffee, and they held an intelligence that was sharp and unsettling. He looked at my bleeding lip, his expression giving nothing away. Then he reached into the inner breast pocket of his suit jacket and pulled out a handkerchief. It was not cotton. It was white linen, perfectly pressed. In the corner, embroidered in neat, severe black thread, were 2 letters, S.M. He pressed the folded square into my hand. His voice was low, a quiet rumble that seemed to vibrate right through my chest. "Do not go to the ground floor," he said. "Kyle is waiting there. The 3rd floor has an auxiliary exit. Take it." My mind, soaked in adrenaline, scrambled for a response. A shaky, hysterical laugh bubbled up in my throat. "Thanks," I managed, my voice trembling. "Professional stranger. You do that often. Rescue women in parking garages." A flicker of something amusement, maybe danced in his eyes. His lips barely moved when he spoke. "He's not the only one watching." My gaze followed his. I looked up. It was not just the one camera. There were 3, all positioned in the corners of the bay, all angled perfectly to cover this exact spot, creating a flawless triangle of surveillance, a tripod of silent digital witnesses. And further down, parked in the deepest shadows near the exit ramp, sat a large, black sport utility vehicle. Its windows were tinted so dark they looked like polished obsidian. It was not parked. It was waiting. The stranger turned from me, adjusting the cuffs of his shirt. He walked away with the same unhurried, predatory grace he had arrived with. He did not look back. As he passed under the yellow light, his suit jacket shifted, pulling tight across his back. I saw it through the fabric, on the broad plane of his shoulder blade. Black ink, a tattoo. It was a crown, but it was cracked, split right down the middle. I did not wait to see him get into the vehicle. I ran. I did not look back. I found the stairwell he mentioned and threw myself up the flights, my sneakers slapping against the metal steps. I hit the door for the 3rd floor, burst through the auxiliary exit, and spilled out into an alley slick with rain. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. I stumbled onto the main street, gasping in the wet, cold Chicago air. The sounds of the city, the traffic on Wabash Avenue, felt deafening after the silence of the garage. I pulled out my phone, my fingers fumbling with the screen. "One new message, Owen, from an unknown number." The message itself was short. 6 words. "Caldwell, do not go home tonight." Below the text was an attachment, an image. It was not a photograph. It was a drawing, done in heavy black ink, a playing card. A queen. I stared at the image, the rain plastering my hair to my face and dripping from my chin. The linen handkerchief in my hand was still warm from his touch. I did not know it then. I could not have... Ivy Caldwell, who hunted facts for a living, had just missed the most important one. I thought I had just escaped a monster. But I had run straight into the arms of a king, and that kiss, in a cold garage under the watchful eye of 3 cameras, had just put me at the center of a game that owned the entire city. I did not go home. The anonymous text message was punctuation on a fact I already knew. Home was the first place Kyle would look. I found a 24-hour pharmacy, bought a cheap gray sweatshirt, and paid cash for a room at a motel off the highway, the kind with flickering neon and doors that opened directly onto the parking lot. I jammed the flimsy metal chair under the doorknob. It would not stop him. Not really, but it would make noise. It would buy me seconds. I sat on the stiff, polyester bedspread under a light that hummed. The linen handkerchief was still clutched in my fist. The initials, S.M., stared up at me. My blood, now dry, had turned the white linen a rusty brown. I brought it to my face. The smell of mint tobacco was still strong, sharp and clean, cutting through the motel room's antiseptic bleach smell. It was the scent of the man who had kissed me, the scent of my unlikely escape. That scent, so clean and definite, was the opposite of my childhood. I grew up in a steel town in Pennsylvania, a place that smelled of rust and coal smoke and resignation. My father was a long-haul truck driver, and he was gone for weeks, then back for days filled with the stale smell of whiskey and a quiet rage that vibrated through the thin walls of our house. My mother was a night shift waitress, perpetually smelling of coffee grounds and cheap perfume, her smile a beautiful, brittle thing. I learned to be invisible. I learned to read the tension in my father's shoulders, the precise angle of his jaw that meant we should scatter. I also learned that when my mother's face was bruised, the police who eventually showed up would look at her, look at my father, nod, and leave. They called it a domestic disturbance. I called it what it was, a crime they chose to ignore. That is why I left. That is why I fought for a scholarship to Northwestern. It is why I chose forensic research. I am not a lawyer. I am the woman who finds the truth the lawyers get to use. I do not care about the blood, not really. I care about the evidence. I traffic in the facts that people try to bury, because I know what happens when those facts stay buried. My job, forensic research assistant, is my anchor. I sift through mountains of metadata. I trace money chains that look like complex spider webs. I analyze thousands of hours of security camera footage, looking for the one frame that changes the story. I work for a civil rights firm in Chicago, usually on behalf of exploited workers, people whose wages were stolen by complex shell corporations. I find the digital proof. I cling to the truth like it is a life raft, because in my experience, the truth does not show up unless you drag it, kicking and screaming, into the light. Kyle was the opposite of truth. He was all beautiful surfaces, a tattoo artist with hands that could create stunning, intricate art. He was ridiculously charming in that broken, artistic way. He understood my long hours, my obsession with my work, until he did not, until the charm became control, until he wanted to know where I was every minute of every day. When I finally ended it, he did not take it well. The restraining order I filed was just a piece of paper to him. I found that out for certain this afternoon, when I got the alert that he had made bail on an unrelated assault charge. He should not have been out. He has protection. Someone with influence is pulling strings for him. I looked out the motel window, past the buzzing neon sign, toward the distant glow of the Chicago skyline. By day, Chicago is all business, the gray-green water of Lake Michigan stretching out like a placid, cold sheet. By night, the city wears its secrets on the outside. Neon crowns flicker on the tops of skyscrapers. Rumors, whispered in the office break room, said those crowns all belonged to one family, the Marchese family. I unfolded the handkerchief again, smoothing the creases. S.M. My stomach tightened. I had seen the name, in the newspapers, in the periphery of my research. Santo Marchesi, 34 years old, the public face of a massive logistics and import empire. The business journals called him an entrepreneur. The crime reporters hinted at mafia ties, at shadows and whispers. But he was clean. No charges, no indictments. He was a ghost in a $1,000 suit. My privacy at the office was absolute. I do not mix my work life with my personal disasters. Only Nina, my colleague, knew I was running from Kyle. Nina is pragmatic. She wears sensible shoes, and she is the only person I trust. She knew I was in trouble, but she did not know the specifics of my current case, the one I was working on when Kyle found me. For the last few weeks, my digging into an exploited workers' fund had stumbled into something much bigger, a chain of shell companies, a high-profile medical charity that seemed to be washing millions of dollars, and all of it pointed, impossibly, toward a single, untouchable federal judge. That is why I was at the Elysium. It was not for the music or the expensive drinks. I was supposed to meet a source, an accountant from the charity, a man so terrified he would only meet in the basement of a crowded club. He promised me a memory card, the one piece of hard evidence I needed to connect the money to the judge. But he never showed up. Kyle did. It was a setup. I ran. I threw the handkerchief onto the nightstand. The mint smell was suffocating me. I could not sleep. I needed facts. I opened my laptop and connected to the motel's unsecured wireless network, wincing at the breach of my own protocols. I have a contact, a guy who monitors security feeds for half the city. He owes me for finding footage that cleared his brother in a theft case. I sent him a coded message. I needed the footage from the Elysium garage, level 2, tonight. It took him 40 minutes. A file appeared in my encrypted inbox. I downloaded it. I hit play. The quality was better than I expected, crystal clear. I watched myself, a grainy, terrified figure hiding behind the pillar. I watched Kyle scanning the garage, his face contorted in rage, yelling into his phone. I watched the elevator doors open. I watched Santo Marchesi step out. I watched myself launch from the shadows and grab him. I watched the kiss. It was exactly as I remembered. His hand cupping my face, his body shielding mine. I watched Kyle freeze, curse, and then retreat up the stairwell. But I kept watching. I rewound it. The camera had been in a fixed wide shot, capturing the entire elevator bay. But the instant I laid my hands on Santo's jacket, the camera moved. It was not a pan. It was not a security guard tracking motion. It was a slow, deliberate tilt. The lens zoomed in slightly, pushing Kyle to the edge of the frame and centering us, centering the kiss. It was not a security feed capturing a random event. It was a director aiming his shot. The man in the suit was right. He was not the only one watching. That camera had been watching him, and now it had seen me. I spent the dark hours in that humming motel room, the chair jammed under the knob, my back against the headboard. Sleep was a luxury I could not afford. At the first gray light of dawn, I left. I drove my own car, feeling exposed, like a target painted on the driver's side door. I had to get to the office. My laptop was there, my files, my real defenses. I arrived before the city was truly awake, before even Nina, my colleague, had started her coffee maker. A package was on my desk. It was a plain brown cardboard box, about the size of a shoebox. No postage, no courier label. It had been hand-delivered. My name, Ivy Caldwell, was printed on a simple white label. My stomach twisted. I took the box, walked it to the small break room, and used my keys to slit the packing tape. My hands were steady. I am good at managing the tremors until later. Inside, on a bed of black foam, were 2 items. The first was a small, heavy object. I lifted it. It was made of solid, clear glass, a playing card, the Queen. It was identical to the drawing I had received last night, only this was 3-dimensional, cold and perfect. The second item was a single, dull metal key, the kind for a padlock or a self-storage unit. As I held the glass Queen up to the weak morning light, my personal phone buzzed on the counter, the same unknown number. The text message was brutally simple. If you want to live, do not trust Kyle. If you want to win, go to storage unit C38 at 9 o'clock. Come alone. This was a trap. This was clearly, obviously, a trap. This is how the people I research, the ones who disappear, meet their end. They follow instructions from unknown numbers. But I was already in the trap. The footage from the garage proved that, the camera tilting, zooming in on the kiss, the professional way Santo Marchesi had handled me, had handled Kyle, had managed the scene. It was not a random stranger. It was a participant. I looked at the clock on the wall. It was 7:45. I had just over an hour. I drove to the address. It was a sprawling, anonymous self-storage facility in a part of Chicago that smelled of diesel and the river. Gray metal doors stretched in long, depressing rows. I found row C. I found unit 38. A standard orange padlock secured the latch. The key slid in. Cold and oiled, it turned with a satisfying, heavy click. I braced myself, pulling the corrugated metal door up. It rattled loudly in the morning quiet. The air inside was stale, tasting of dust and concrete. The unit was small, 10 feet by 10 feet, and it was completely empty, except for one item sitting directly in the center of the floor. A vintage leather suitcase. It was old, the brown leather scuffed and softened by decades of use. It looked like something my father might have carried, a relic from a life I had escaped. It sat there, not as luggage, but as a statement, a choice, waiting to be made. I stepped inside. I knelt on the dusty floor. The two brass latches on the front were not locked. I flipped them open. I lifted the lid. My breath caught. It was full of money, stacks of $100 bills, bound in simple paper bands. I did not need to count it, not really, but my mind did the math automatically. $10,000 per stack, at least 7 stacks, $70,000, maybe more. It was walking money, enough to disappear. Beside the cash, there was a black, plastic-wrapped burner phone. Beneath that, a slim external hard drive, and resting on top of all of it was a single sheet of thick, cream-colored stationery, folded in half. I opened the note. The handwriting was elegant, sharp, and black. Walking money, the real fortune is on this drive. I stared at the cash, then at the hard drive. I could take the money and run. Disappear from Chicago, from Kyle, from the case. Start a new life, but I knew, with a certainty that settled like cold iron in my gut, that they would find me. Running was not winning. Running was just dying. Tired. I left the suitcase. I left the money. I took the hard drive and the burner phone. I drove to the nearest public library, a place of comforting silence and anonymity. I found a private study carrel in the back, the kind with high walls, and plugged the hard drive into my laptop. My hands were shaking now. I had held it together, but the adrenaline was wearing off, leaving the sharp, metallic taste of fear. The drive contained only 2 files, 2 audio recordings. I plugged in my earbuds. I clicked on track 1. A voice filled my head, smooth, educated, confident. The preliminary data is irrelevant. We control the final review board. The patent's approval is contingent on our timeline. I recognized that voice. I had heard it on news clips and in interviews. It was Rex Halverson, the chief executive officer of the medical charity I was investigating, the man at the top of the money laundering chain. Then another voice spoke. That voice. The one I had heard in the garage, the one that smelled of mint and rain. Your timeline is aggressive, Rex, Santo Marchesi said, and expensive. You are not just buying a patent, you are buying a federal judge. His loyalty is guaranteed, Halverson pressed. His loyalty, Santo's voice cut in, soft as steel, is auctioned, and the price just went up. Your problem is that he is talking. My problem is that I am in the room with him when he does. We need this concluded. I hit pause. My pulse was a drum against my ribs. This was it. This was the conspiracy, the head of a major charity and the city's alleged Mafia king, casually discussing the bribery of a federal judge, the judge I suspected, the judge whose name I had circled in red ink in my files. I clicked on track 2. The quality was terrible. It was a phone call, full of static and background noise. I heard Kyle's voice, impatient and angry. The girl is getting close, Kyle snarled. She's supposed to meet her source tonight. She will get the evidence. Another man's voice, flat and cold, one I did not recognize. Make sure she does not... Kyle laughed. It was a short, ugly sound. Do not worry. She's going to have an accident tonight. She's going to slip on the train stairs. She will be gone. I tore the earbuds from my ears. The silence of the library rushed in, deafening. He was not just stalking me. He was not just an abusive ex. He was hired to kill me. This was never about our relationship. This was about my job. I was not a victim of a bad romance. I was a witness marked for execution. And Kyle was just the tool. I looked at the burner phone in my hand, the kiss, the cameras, the message. It was not a rescue. It was an interception. Santo Marchesi had not stumbled upon me. He had been waiting. He knew I was the girl who was getting close. He knew Kyle was coming for me. He had stepped into the frame deliberately. He had put himself between the killer and the target. My mind raced. He was implicated on track 1, but he was also giving me the weapon to destroy Kyle on track 2. He was handing me my life and the case on a silver platter. Why? I unwrapped the plastic from the burner phone. I powered it on. The screen glowed with a generic blue background. There was one contact saved in the phone book. 2 initials. Sam. My finger hovered over the call button. I was a forensic analyst. I dealt in facts. The fact was, I was supposed to be dead. The fact was, this man had stopped it. The fact was, he was now offering me a choice. I pressed call. It rang twice, then a click. Miss Caldwell. His voice wrapped around me, low and calm. No surprise, no introduction. You knew, I whispered, my voice sounding thin. You knew he would be there. I knew a threat would be there, he corrected me. Kyle was a fortunate coincidence. For you. You sent me this, I said, looking at the hard drive. That first recording, it implicates you. You are discussing a bribe. There was a pause, not a hesitation, but a deliberate silence. It shows I have access, Miss Caldwell. It shows I am in the room where the decisions are made. What you need to understand is that your target, Rex Halverson, is my associate, and he made a mistake. He hired your ex-boyfriend to clean up his mess. Your problem is Kyle. My problem is Halverson. Our solution, it seems, is mutual. What do you want from me? I want you to stay alive. The motel was a good instinct. Do not go back. Do not go to your apartment ever again and get rid of your car. It is a tracking device, and its roots are too familiar to anyone watching the city's cameras. I looked out the window at my faithful sedan. I cannot just buy a new car. The money in the suitcase is for logistics, he said, a note of impatience in his voice. Use it. I need a meeting. 15 minutes, somewhere the walls are stone, not plaster and microphones, somewhere quiet. Where? St. Lucia Cathedral, at dusk, 6 o'clock. My mind spun. A cathedral, with him, a man who auctioned judges. This is insane. I said, not trusting me is fatal, he replied, and all the softness was gone from his voice. It was flat, cold, and absolute. Kyle failed. They will not send him next time. They will send a professional. 15 minutes, Miss Caldwell, or you can take your chances. He was right. The recording of Kyle proved it. He was not wrong. Distrusting this man was a death sentence. Trusting him was something else, something I could not yet define. 15 minutes, I said, my voice firm. 6 o'clock, huh? The line went dead. I sat in the library carrel for a long time. I was no longer just Ivy Caldwell, researcher. I was a target. I was a witness. And now, I was an unwilling ally to the city's biggest shadow. I left the library. I went to a used car lot and paid cash for an anonymous sedan. I drove to a different motel, one further out, and paid cash again. I sat on the bed. I took the linen handkerchief, the one stained with my blood, from my pocket. I folded it carefully and tucked it into the waistband of my jeans. Then, from the bottom of my purse, I pulled out the small, pearl-handled butterfly knife my mother had carried on her night shifts for 20 years. I checked the mechanism. The blade snapped open, sharp and gleaming. It was a pathetic defense against the kind of world I was walking into, but it was mine. I would go to the cathedral. I would wear his handkerchief as a shield, and I would bring my mother's knife, just in case. St. Lucia was quiet at dusk, the smell of old stone and wax filling the air. It was a massive, ornate cathedral, and at this hour, it was almost empty. I felt like a trespasser, my sneakers silent on the marble floor. I sat in a back pew, my hands jammed into the pockets of my new jacket. My mother's butterfly knife was cold in my right pocket. Santo Marchesi's linen handkerchief was in my left. I did not know which one was the real weapon. He did not use the main doors. He emerged from a shadow near the altar. From a small door I assumed led to the sacristy. He wore a dark wool coat and trousers. No suit. He looked less like a king and more like a ghost, his footsteps making no sound. He did not come to my pew. He sat in the one directly in front of me, facing the altar, his back to me. "Your 15 minutes started when you walked in, Miss Caldwell," he said. His voice was low, but the acoustics of the church carried it perfectly. "You came alone," I observed. "So did you. A dangerous move for someone who was supposed to be murdered last night." "Why help me?" I asked, my voice a strained whisper. "That audio file on the drive implicates you. You are discussing a bribe with Halverson." "It proves I am in the room," he said, still not turning. "It proves I have access. What I did not tell you is why I am in that room." He lifted his left hand and rested it on the back of the pew. Wrapped around his wrist was a simple strand of dark wooden beads, worn smooth. Her name was Camilla. I waited. The silence stretched. "She was my younger sister," he said. "She had a severe pain condition. 4 years ago, her doctor prescribed her a new analgesic, a miracle drug. It was fast-tracked for approval by a very cooperative federal judge." My blood chilled. "Lowell Pierce." "Lowell Pierce," he confirmed. "Rex Halverson's company manufactured the drug. It was incredibly effective. It was also toxic. It destroyed her kidneys. She was dead in 6 months." This was not about logistics. This was not about a turf war. Halverson buried the data. He and Pierce covered up the other deaths. They paid off the families. My family did not want money. He finally turned, his dark eyes meeting mine. The grief in them was old, cold, and hard as the stone around us. "My motive is not business, Miss Caldwell. My motive is justice for Camilla." "This is revenge," I breathed. "Revenge is emotional. Justice is precise," he countered. "I'm offering you a professional arrangement. You want Kyle? You want to expose the corruption that almost got you killed. I want Halverson and Pierce. I want the forensic proof that the drug was poison. I will provide the resources to keep you alive. I will dismantle the network that is protecting Kyle. You will use your skills to find the evidence we need to burn them both to the ground." "I am a researcher," I said, my hand tightening around the knife in my pocket. "I am not a killer." "I'm glad to hear it. That is my one boundary. No one innocent gets hurt. We use the truth. We expose them. We do not become them." He faced the altar again. "Do we have an agreement, Miss Caldwell?" I looked at the flickering sanctuary lamps. I was making a deal with a man the city called a Mafia king, but he was also the only person who had offered me a way out that was not running. He was offering me a way to fight. "We have an agreement." I did not go back to the motel. I did not go anywhere I had ever been before. Using the cash from the suitcase, I rented a small, anonymous apartment under a fake name, a sterile box in a building with better locks. I spent the next 2 days working. I used the hard drive Santo had given me as a key. It was more than just audio files. It was a secure back door into Halverson's servers. The fear subsided, replaced by the cold, familiar hum of the hunt. I was good at this. I followed the money. The charity fund was a masterpiece of misdirection, a web of offshore accounts. But I found the thread. I found the final transfer, a direct deposit into a holding company. I ran the company's registration. The sole director, Judge Lowell Pierce. I had him. Then I dug into the pharmaceutical side. I cross-referenced the bad drugs batch numbers with warehouse manifests. And then I saw it. A name in a visitor log for the main distribution center. A check-in code. Kyle. He'd been there. The same day he was hired to kill me. He was not just a stalker, he was an inside man. I was staring at the screen, at Kyle's name. When my new burner phone rang, it was not Santo. It was a scrambled number. I answered. "Ivy. Thank God. Do not come to the office. Do not go home. Do not go anywhere." It was Nina. My colleague. She sounded terrified. "Nina, what is wrong? How did you get this number?" I cannot explain. Just listen. The police are here. They are raiding your desk. They have a warrant." My stomach turned to ice. A warrant for what? For you, she whispered. Embezzlement. Ivy. They are saying you stole money from the firm's civil rights fund. Someone sent them a video. Before I could ask, my laptop, still connected to the public internet, lit up with notifications, a local tabloid blog. I clicked the link. The headline was Brutal Civil Rights Researcher Caught in Embezzlement Scheme with Mafia Boyfriend. I watched, horrified. It was a video. It was Kyle. He was crying, his face a mask of fake grief. He said I was unstable, that I was stealing from the firm, and then the final crushing blow. A photograph. It was us, in the parking garage, kissing. It was a still frame, pulled directly from the security footage, the one that had zoomed in. She is in deep, Kyle's voice narrated, full of venom. She left me for him. She is Santo Marchese's new Mafia doll. I felt the air leave my lungs. They were not just trying to kill me. They were destroying my life, my reputation. They were discrediting me. Any evidence I brought forward would be seen as the desperate act of a scorned woman and a criminal's puppet. The burner phone rang again. This time, it was Santo. They are poisoning the well, I said, my voice shaking with rage. Pierce. It has to be him. He's using Kyle to make me look like a liar. He is. Santo's voice was calm, cutting through my panic. And it is a smart move, but it is not the winning one. Your weapon is the truth, Ivy. They just changed the battlefield. You cannot go to the police. So we go somewhere else. What do you mean? I am sending someone to you. His name is Luca. He is my lens. They control the narrative. We are about to give it a new ending. Another text from Nina came through before I could reply. Ivy, one more thing. There is a federal agent here. Her name is Avery Hart. She's asking questions about the Halverson file, but she's avoiding Pierce. She's digging, but she's afraid. She thinks you are the missing link. I met Avery Hart in a 24-hour diner that smelled of stale coffee and bleach. She had the tired eyes of a public servant who had seen too much. She did not offer to shake my hand. You are a hard woman to find, Miss Caldwell, she said, sipping her black coffee. I am being framed, I said flatly. I have seen the video. It is compelling. It is a lie. I pushed a small and clean memory card across the Formica table. I do not care if you believe me. I care that you believe data. On this drive is the audio of Kyle admitting he was hired to kill me, and the warehouse log showing he had access to Halverson's drug shipments, the same shipments that killed Camilla Marchese. Avery's eyes sharpened at the name. Camilla. She looked from the drive back to me. I know you are working with him. I do not trust Santo Marchese. You do not have to trust him, I said. You just have to trust that he wants the same thing we do. Justice for his sister. She pocketed the drive. I will run this. If it is clean, I will be in touch. But you should know, they are not just trying to discredit you. They are trying to silence you. Halverson, Judge Pierce. They are a system. And you are a bug they are trying to squash before a major appeals hearing next week. I left the diner and walked into the cold night. The system was laid bare. Halverson was the money. Pierce was the power. Hired security. Men in masks were the muscle, and Kyle was the dog, wagging his tail for his masters. I returned to the safe house. Santo was not there, but his man, Luca, he was young, with a laptop that looked like it could launch a satellite. Santo says you have the truth, Luca said, not looking up from his screen. My job is to give it a voice. He began a controlled leak. Not everything, just enough. The warehouse logs, the audio of Kyle. He sent it, encrypted, to 2 independent journalists and to Agent Hart's private server. We were moving. The pieces were in play. That night, alone in the sterile apartment, I felt a vibration. The burner phone. A text message from the same unknown number that had sent the Queen. It was another picture. This time, it was the glass queen again, but it was not perfect. A long, thin crack ran right through its center. It was a warning. Do not break. Do not lose yourself. Just as I was processing the message, I heard a sound in the hallway. a key sliding into my lock. I grabbed my mother's knife. The door opened. It was Santo. He stopped, seeing the knife in my hand, my back against the wall. "They found me," I whispered. "No," he said, holding up his hands. "I did. That agent, Hart, she's not just digging, she's being watched. They tracked her from the diner. They know where you met. They do not know where you are now, but they will. We are leaving." "Where another apartment?" "No," he said, his face grim. "Somewhere they cannot follow, somewhere with no signal." He took me to an abandoned church on the edge of the river. It was massive, cold and beautiful, the stained glass windows boarded up. "My family owns this land," Bahi said, pushing open the heavy oak door. "No one comes here. We will be safe tonight." As I stepped inside, my burner phone vibrated one last time. It was the cracked queen. The message was simple. "Do not forget who you are when you are hiding with a king." The adrenaline from the night before had faded, leaving behind the cold, hard certainty of facts. The data I had was not enough. The audio, the warehouse logs, they were powerful but circumstantial. I needed the physical proof. I needed the poison itself. I spent the morning in the cold, abandoned church, my laptop tethered to Luca's secure connection. I was not digging through financial records anymore. I was tracking logistics. Global positioning system manifests. I found it, a single pallet, ID number logged, containing the recalled toxic drug. It was moving. They were not destroying it, they were hiding it. "It is at a cold storage facility," I told Santo Safsase, pointing to the screen. "Cicero, they are holding it." "They are relabeling it," he said, his voice flat. "Halverson is cleaning his inventory, selling the poison under a new name before Pierce's hearing." "I have to go there," I said. "If I can plant a beacon on that pallet, I can track it. We can get the entire distribution chain. Live." "No," he said. "It is a fortress. They will have security." "This is my part, Santo, my forensics. I am the one who plants the evidence." He finally nodded, his jaw tight. "I'm driving." We took the anonymous sedan. The sky was a low, bruised gray, and a cold rain began to spit against the windshield. We were heading out of the city, toward the industrial corridor, when I saw it, the black truck, 2 cars back. "He is here," I whispered. "I see him." The truck accelerated, its engine roaring. It swerved into the next lane, pulling alongside us. "Kyle," and he was grinning, his face pale and manic. He slammed his truck into the side of our sedan. The sound was a deafening shriek of metal. Santo fought the wheel, but Kyle rammed us again and again, forcing us off the main road. We spun out, fishtailing on the wet pavement, and came to a stop in a deserted industrial lot. The engine stalled. Kyle's truck blocked us in. He jumped out, stalking toward my door. Santo was already moving, but Kyle was faster. He ripped my door open, the rain pouring in. "Get out, Ivy!" he roared. He grabbed my arm, his fingers digging in like steel traps, and hauled me out of the car. I stumbled, falling to my knees on the wet asphalt. "Kyle, stop." "Stop, I am just getting started." He loomed over me. "You should have just disappeared. Judge Pierce." He told me himself. He likes me. He said, "Just make sure that little bitch vanishes tonight." Tonight. Ivy. He was admitting it, confessing. He was too consumed by his rage to see the trap. He reached down to grab me again. I moved. I was not the same woman he had cornered before. I drove my elbow hard into his knee. He howled, buckling. I scrambled away, using the car for leverage. He lunged, and we fought. A desperate, slipping battle in the cold rain. He was stronger, but I was precise. He pinned me against the open driver's side door, his forearm pressing against my throat. "You like locks, Kyle?" I choked out, the rain and my hair blinding me. "What?" he snarled, confused by the words. "You like keeping things tied down." I was not reaching for my knife. My hand shot into my pocket and grabbed the linen handkerchief, Santo's handkerchief. In one violent, practiced motion, I wrapped the cloth around his right wrist, the one pinning me. I yanked it, looping the other end through the open steering wheel and tied a brutal double knot. "Me too," I spat. He stared at his hand, trapped, his eyes wide with shock. I did not wait. I scrambled into the car from the driver's side, sliding over the center console. Santo was already in the passenger seat. "Start it," he said, his voice a low command. The engine turned over. Kyle was screaming, pulling at the wheel, but the linen held. I slammed the car into reverse and hit the gas. The car shot backward onto the road, yanking Kyle off his feet. He was dragged for a moment before the knot ripped the skin from his wrist, leaving him screaming in the mud as we sped away. We did not speak. Santo made a call. We abandoned the sedan. 10 minutes later, the black sport utility vehicle was there. That night, we went to the warehouse. It was a fortress of concrete and steel. Santo bypassed the main security. We moved through the shadows of the loading dock, silent as ghosts. We entered the main cold storage. The air was frigid, humming with the sound of 100 refrigeration units. Then, silence. The humming stopped, the lights clicked off. We were plunged into absolute, freezing darkness. My burner phone vibrated. A text from Luca. "Power cut. They are onto you. Someone is accessing the internal cameras remotely. IP traces from Pierce's office. They are watching you. Live." "They are watching," I whispered to Santo. "Pierce himself." "Where is the pallet?" "Section F. They will have all eyes on it." I could just make out the tiny red light of a camera, high in the rafters above that section. "Luca," I typed, my fingers numb. "Can you switch the feeds?" "No," he replied. "They are locked out, but I can redirect the active camera. They are watching F. I can make them watch B. You have one switch. Make it count." "Do it now." The red light above Section F winked out. Across the massive room, a new one glowed. "We need a decoy," I said. Santo understood. He pulled the string of wooden beads from his wrist. Camilla's. He moved through the darkness, silent, and with a flick of his wrist, tossed them onto an empty metal shelf in Section B. We waited. My phone buzzed. "They took it. 3 men, armed, moving on Section B. Go, now." We ran. We kept to the shadows, our footsteps masked by the echo of the guards across the room. We found Section F. I found the pallet. I knelt, my hands shaking so badly I could barely peel the adhesive from the beacon. I jammed it deep into the plastic wrapping, hiding it from view. "I am at the terminal," I whispered to Santo, plugging my drive into the local computer. "Luca, I am in. Download everything, ledgers, bribe lists, shipping manifests. Take it all." "Downloading, Santo stood by the main door, a shadow against the loading bay. His hand was inside his coat, but he did not draw his weapon. He was a statue of coiled patience. He was keeping his promise. "Got it done." Luca's text came. "All data secured. Get out. They're coming back." We moved. We ran for the side exit, the one we had used to come in. We burst through the metal door, back into the rain-slicked alley. A figure stepped from the shadows. It was Kyle. His right hand was wrapped in a bloody rag. His face was a mask of pure, unadulterated hate. In his left hand, he held his revolver. "Going somewhere," he hissed. He was fast. Before Santo could shield me, Kyle lunged. He grabbed me by the hair, spinning me around, and pressed the cold, wet barrel of the gun to my temple. "I told you I would finish it," he breathed, his voice ragged. Santo froze, his hands raising slowly. "Put the gun down, Kyle," Santo said, his voice dangerously calm. Kyle laughed, a high, cracking sound. "You, the big boss, look at you. You are just a man." He pressed the gun harder into my skin. "Go on, queen." Kiss him goodbye, you broken queen." Santo took one step forward. "Let her go." "No, you are going to watch." My mind was a razor. The gun was at my temple. His arm was locked around my chest, but I knew him. I knew his weaknesses. I forced a shaky, hysterical laugh. "Kyle, are you jealous?" It shattered his focus. He flinched. "What?" "You are angry he kissed me," I gasped. You cannot stand it." "Shut up," he screamed. His arm was tight, but I knew exactly where his good hand was, the one holding me, and I knew about the scar tissue on it, an old burn I had tattooed over for him. I threw my head back, smashing my skull into his face. I heard his nose break, his grip loosened for a fraction of a second. It was all I needed. I dropped my head and bit down, hard, right on the sensitive, raised scar tissue of his left hand. He screamed, a high, thin sound of pure agony. His arm flew open reflexively. Santo did not hesitate. He moved like a blur. He was not a logistician, he was a predator. He disarmed Kyle in one brutal, fluid motion, a twist, a snap. I heard the wrist break, and the gun clattered to the wet pavement. Santo hit him once, a precise, devastating strike to the jaw, and Kyle crumpled, unconscious. I stood there, panting, tasting Kyle's blood in my mouth. And the alley exploded in light. Blue and red, washing over the wet brick. Sirens wailed, deafening. Cars screeched to a halt at both ends of the alley. Federal agents, police officers. Avery Hart stepped out of the lead car, her gun drawn, but she was not aiming at us. She looked at me, at Santo, at the man on the ground. "We tracked your beacon. Miss Caldwell," she said, her voice tight. "I got a silent ping from your burner phone." I nodded, my legs turning to water. Another car pulled up, a black sedan. Judge Lowell Pierce got out, his face a mask of official concern. He was here to supervise the cleanup. He saw Kyle unconscious. He saw me alive. He saw Santo. The panic in his eyes was instant. "Agent Hart," Pierce boomed, trying to take control. "What is this? Secure that man?" He pointed at Santo. Avery Hart did not move. "We have him, Judge." She nodded to two of her agents. "Cuff him." The agents walked past Santo. They walked straight to Judge Lowell Pierce. What is the meaning of this?" Pierce sputtered, his face turning a blotchy red. "This is an outrage." "Judge Lowell Pierce," Avery said, her voice clear and cold, ringing out in the alley. "You are under arrest for conspiracy, bribery, and obstruction of justice." "You have no proof," he bellowed. Avery held up her phone. "I have the live feed from your office, sir, the one you were just using to watch this warehouse, and I have the logs of every file you just tried to wipe. We have it all." His face collapsed. As they led him away in handcuffs, my phone buzzed, a news alert. Rex Halverson had been arrested by the Federal Bureau of Investigation at his home 5 minutes earlier. The rest was a blur of flashing lights and shouted questions. I gave my statement. Hours later, as the rain finally stopped and the sky turned a pale, bruised gray, we were released. The black sport utility vehicle drove us through the silent, sleeping city. We returned to the abandoned church. The silence in here was different. It was not heavy. It was clean. We stood in the center aisle, the first hint of dawn filtering through the boarded-up windows. "It is over," I whispered. "It is," Santo said. He stood a few feet away, just watching me, and he had not touched me. He had kept his promise. This time, I was the one who moved. I stepped toward him. I reached up and put my hands on the lapels of his dark coat. "Thank you," I said, and I kissed him. It was not the desperate, panicked kiss from the garage. It was not for a camera. It was not for an audience. It was slow and deep, and it was a choice. It tasted of the cold night and the rain and of relief. He kissed me back, his hands finding my waist, pulling me close. And in the quiet of the church, I was not a queen. I was not broken. I was just Ivy, and I was safe. The kiss in the old church was an anchor. In the hurricane that followed, it was the only thing that felt solid. The days that came after were a blur of depositions, secure federal locations, and the relentless, blinding flash of news cameras. The system, which had seemed like an impenetrable fortress, had cracked wide open. Judge Lowell Pierce was indicted on a dozen counts, starting with bribery and conspiracy and ending with obstruction of justice. The evidence, pulled from his own servers, the live feed he had used to watch the warehouse, was his undoing. Rex Halverson, stripped of his judicial protection, faced a massive federal indictment for medical fraud and involuntary manslaughter. His company's stock, his reputation, and his empire evaporated in less than 48 hours. The toxic drug was pulled from every market in the world, its path of destruction finally, brutally cauterized. And Kyle, stripped of his powerful protectors, was just a violent, failed tattoo artist. He pleaded guilty to attempted murder, aggravated assault, and stalking. He was just a tool. And once his purpose was served, the system he had tried to leverage discarded him without a second thought. The best news came 1 week later. The federal government, led by Agent Avery Hart's now validated task force, had successfully seized Halverson's primary assets. A significant portion, millions of dollars, was diverted to establish a new, independent fund for the victims of the drug. It was named the Camilla Fund. Justice, as Santo had said, not revenge. Precise. I met Avery Hart one last time, not in a grimy diner, but in a sterile federal conference room. She slid a file across the polished table. "Your testimony was clean, Miss Caldwell. Your evidence was airtight. We got them." "We got them," I agreed, the words feeling heavy and final. She leaned forward, her professional mask slipping for just a moment. "Thank you. Ivy, you did what my office was afraid to do. You provided the leverage we needed to move on Pierce. We all wanted the same thing." "Did we?" she countered, her gaze sharp and unwavering. "I wanted justice. Santo Marchesi wanted revenge, and he wanted you." I stiffened, my hands closing into fists on my lap. "Do not be naive," Avery said, her voice dropping. "He's still the Mafia king. He's a predator who just happened to be aiming in the same direction you were. He helped you for his sister. Yes, but he also helped you because of you. Do not ever forget what he is capable of, or what he is." I looked at her. This woman who had also bent the rules, who had followed my beacon without a warrant, who had used my intel to trap a judge. "And what are you—" "Agent Hart, we all operated in the gray to get this done." "The difference," she said, standing up, "is that my gray has a badge. His has a body count. Be careful. Ivy, he won his war, but men like him, they always find another." Her words echoed in the silence of the abandoned church. It had become our strange sanctuary, the only place I felt truly safe. That night, I confronted him. He was standing by one of the newly uncovered stained glass windows, watching the Black River flow past. "She thinks you are just using me," I said. My voice was quiet, but it carried in the vaulted space. Santo did not turn. Avery Hart sees the world in black and white, in badges and targets. It is her job. "And what is your job, Santo?" I walked toward him, the sound of my own footsteps too loud. "She's not wrong. You are dangerous. I saw you in that alley with Kyle. I saw your face. You were capable of anything." "I was capable of stopping him," he said, his voice flat. He finally turned to face me. The moonlight streaming through the window carved his face into hard planes and deep shadows. And I did stop. "'Cause I was there," I whispered. This was the razor's edge. This was the internal battle I'd been fighting since I kissed him. How could I love this man, this savior who was also a walking risk, this man who spoke of justice, but whose power was born from that same shadow Avery warned me about? "I cannot live like that, Santo," I said, my voice gaining strength. "I cannot be with a man who operates in the dark. I cannot be the woman who waits by the window, wondering if the man she loves is coming home, or if he is the reason someone else is not. I will not be your anchor to the light, just so you can visit. I need a boundary, a real one." I took a deep breath. "If you continue, if you choose that life, the blood path, we are done. I will walk, and I will not look back." He was silent for a long time, so long I thought he would not answer. He just watched me, his dark eyes searching my face. Then he reached out, not to touch me, but to brush his fingers against the wooden frame of the window. "Do you know what I was doing before I met you?" "Ivy," he asked, his voice low. "I was drowning. Camilla's death. It was a weight I was carrying in the dark. I was using the family's power, yes, but it was just for revenge. It was all I had left." He stepped away from the light, back into the shadow. "I'm already withdrawing. I have been for months. The logistics empire. I am restructuring it, making it legitimate. Cutting ties, Halverson's drug route, the one he ran through my ports. It was one of the last. You did not just expose him, you helped me cauterize the wound." He looked at me, and his eyes were clear. "This life you are afraid of, I am leaving it. It is slow, it is ugly, and it is dangerous. But I am leaving it. I was doing it for Camilla. Now," his voice dropped, "I am doing it for you." I went back to my office. It was the strangest feeling, walking through those doors, the police raid, the warrant. It all felt like it had happened to a different person. My name had been publicly cleared, my role as a confidential informant praised. The firm welcomed me back, their corporate embarrassment palpable. Nina, however, was ecstatic. She had been promoted to senior researcher in my absence. "About damn time," she grinned, hugging me so hard my ribs ached. My boss called me into his office. He offered me a new position. "The Camilla Fund," he said, sliding a thick file across his desk. "It needs a director, an administrator, someone with forensic accounting skills, and a personal connection to the case. We want you to run it, Ivy." And so I did. The work was grueling, finding the other victims, the families Halverson had paid off, the patients who had been poisoned. It was a list of ghosts. The media loved the story. The woman who took down a judge and a corrupt chief executive officer. They gave me a name. "The Black Queen of Chicago." I hated it. It reduced everything I had done, all the pain and terror, to a cheap, sensationalist nickname. It tied me, inextricably, to Santo's shadow. But I swallowed my pride. I did the interviews. I sat for the cameras. I used the name, because every time the Black Queen was on the news, the fund's donation line lit up. If they wanted a queen, I would give them one, as long as it paid to heal the people my other life had touched. My new work laptop pinged one afternoon. It was an email from a public defender, Kyle. He was awaiting sentencing and was formally requesting a character statement from me, a letter of leniency. He claimed he was a victim of Halverson's manipulation, too. I stared at the request. The audacity of it made my hands shake. I remembered his hand on my throat. I remembered the gun to my temple. I remembered his voice on the audio. "She is going to slip on the train stairs." I hit the delete key. I would not write the letter. But I thought of his mother, a woman I had met only once, her hands raw and chapped from cleaning houses. Kyle was her only son. He was a monster, but he was her monster. I spent an hour researching. I found a nonprofit legal aid service that specialized in counseling and support for the families of the incarcerated. I sent the link, anonymously, to his mother's email address, kindness, but with boundaries. My mother would have been proud. My life found a new rhythm. Long days at the fund, quiet evenings with Santo. We were healing. The abandoned church was slowly being restored, the boards coming off the windows, the dust swept away, light streaming in. Luca, Santo's hacker, was gone. He had vanished as quietly as he had appeared, but he left a package for me at the church, a military-grade encrypted laptop and a thick, leather-bound manual. It was a complete guide to personal digital security, surveillance, and counter-surveillance. It was his lens. The perspective he had scribbled on a note was now mine. Some nights, Santo and I would sit in the restored pews, and I would read from the file, Camilla's list. It was the roster of victims, the ones who had died. We read their names aloud, a litany, a promise not to forget. One night, he took the file from my hands. He just looked at me, the new light from the stained glass window painting colors on his face. "Thank you," he said, his voice quiet. "For what?" I asked. For helping you get justice. No, he said. He took my hand, his grip warm and strong. Thank you for kissing me in that garage when you had to, and thank you for stopping me in that alley when you needed to. Weeks later, I found myself driving. The city felt different, Madame Way. It felt like mine again. I parked my car in the garage beneath the Elysium. I walked to the exact spot. The concrete pillar was cold at my back. I smelled the old exhaust, but the dampness was gone. I looked up. The camera was still there. The dark plastic dome, the silent black lens. It was watching. I was sure it was. I did not hide. I did not flinch. I just stood there, grounded, my feet planted on the concrete. I looked straight up into the lens, a clear, steady gaze. I was no longer the prey. I was the witness, and this time, I was the one who saw everything. 1 year, it sounds like a lifetime, but it passed like a single, held breath. The Chicago wind still bit hard off the lake, but the city felt different. It felt like mine again. The Camilla Fund, which I now directed from a bright, secure office, had become a powerful force for victims' advocacy. Nina, sharp and pragmatic as ever, was my chief administrator. She handled the budgets and the press, while I handled the data and the families. We were a good team. Santo Marchese had kept his word, with the kind of meticulous discipline I had come to expect from him. His logistics empire was now the Marchese Clean Transport Group. He had systematically, and sometimes brutally, severed ties with his family's past, selling off the shadowy ports and old warehouses. He was, for the first time, a legitimate, transparent, and incredibly wealthy businessman. And the abandoned church on the river, our cold sanctuary, was no longer abandoned. Today was its grand opening. Santo had poured his new, clean money into its restoration. The boarded-up windows were gone, replaced by magnificent, restored stained glass. The pews were polished, the stone walls clean. It was no longer a place for secrets. It was a community center for the neighborhood, its heavy oak doors thrown wide open. Our life together was not a romance novel. It was a contract, built on hard rules. We were relentlessly transparent. He never put me in the gray areas of his business, and I never brought my case files into his home. We did not romanticize the violence that had forged us. The past was not an adventure. It was a scar, a lesson we had to review daily. I had found my own voice again, not just as a director, but as the researcher I had always been. I spent my nights writing, compiling a systemic report on the intersection of surveillance and power in the city. My thesis was simple. The cameras were not just tools of oppression. Being watched, I argued, could become a way of watching back. The lens did not just belong to the powerful. It belonged to whoever was brave enough to use it. The opening of the center was crowded. The sound of a string quartet, of laughter and conversation, echoed off the high, vaulted ceiling. I saw Avery Hart near the back, looking almost out of place in a civilian dress, holding a cup of punch. She had become a star at the federal agency, the agent who had toppled a corrupt judge. I walked over to her. "Agent Hart," I said, smiling. "I'm so glad you could come." She gave me a small, reserved smile. "Miss Caldwell, it is an incredible transformation, what you have built here." We stood in a comfortable quiet for a moment, both of us watching Santo. He was across the room, talking to an older couple from the neighborhood, his head bent, listening intently. He looked nothing like a Mafia king. He looked like a benefactor. Avery took a small sip of her punch. "One of these days," she said, her voice low, "I am finally going to get the story behind that broken crown tattoo of his." As if he had heard her, Santo looked over. He saw us, and his face softened. He excused himself and walked toward us, moving through the crowd with that same silent, unhurried grace. "Agent Hart," he inclined his head. "Mr. Marchese," she nodded. "We were just admiring your work." "Ivy's work," he corrected her, his eyes finding mine. "I just paid the bills." Avery looked him straight in the eye, a hint of her old professional challenge returning. I was just telling Ivy, one of these days I'm going to ask you about that tattoo. Santo's smile did not waver. Not yet. Agent, not yet. He was called away by one of the volunteers, and he left us, melting back into the crowd. Avery watched him go. "Be careful, Ivy," she said. It was the same thing she always said. "I always am," I replied. Later that night, the last guests had departed. The musicians had packed up, the new lights were dimmed, and the church was quiet, smelling of floor wax and roses. I stood in the center of the main sanctuary, right where the moonlight pooled on the marble floor. Santo came up behind me. He did not speak for a long time. He just stood with me, sharing the silence. "Ivy Caldwell," he said, his voice low and resonating in the huge, empty space. He took my left hand. "You saw the very worst parts of me. You saw what I was capable of, and you did not run. You stayed, and you held me to the light." He reached into his pocket. It was not a large velvet box. It was not a spectacle. He pulled out a single, thin band of polished platinum, simple, strong, unbreakable. "I'm not going to kneel," he said, a small, genuine smile touching his lips. "I'm going to stand. With you." He slid the ring onto my finger. It was a perfect, solid fit. I looked from the ring to his face, my heart so full it ached. I put my hand on his chest, feeling the steady, strong beat of his heart beneath my palm. I had made one small addition to the lobby myself, near the main entrance. Hung in a simple, deep shadow box frame was a square of white linen. It was carefully pressed, but you could still see the creases, and in the corner, the faint, rusty brown stain of my blood, the initials S.M., were stitched in severe black thread. It was our symbol, a reminder of the choice that had started everything, a reminder to kiss when you are being watched and you have to survive, and a reminder to stop when you finally need to see yourself. I was about to lock the heavy front doors when a figure in the shadows startled me. It was a very old woman, dressed entirely in black, her gray hair pulled back in a tight, severe bun. She looked like a ghost from one of Santo's old family photographs. "You are Ivy," she said. It was not a question. Her voice was a dry rasp, her accent thick and Italian. "Yes, I am." She stepped forward into the light, her dark eyes looking deep into mine. They were ancient and filled with a profound sadness. "I knew your mother," she whispered. I froze, my hand still on the door. "My mother from Pennsylvania." "She was a good girl," the old woman said, nodding. "A strong girl, like you. She worked for a time, for my sister." She reached into her worn black handbag and fumbled for a moment, finally pulling out a photograph. The edges were curled and yellow. The surface cracked like old porcelain. "Santo's mother. She told me to hold this. She said, 'Give it to him when he finds La Regina Giusta, the right queen.'" She pressed the photograph into my hand. My breath caught. I stared at it. It was my mother. She was younger, barely 20, smiling a bright, true smile I had never seen in my life, and she was holding a baby, a little girl, swaddled in a white blanket. The baby was not smiling. She was staring at the camera with a look of intense, serious gravity. I stared at that tiny, serious face, the shape of the eyes, the determined set of the mouth. My gaze shot across the lobby. Avery Hart was just leaving, shrugging on her coat. I looked back at the baby. It could not be. It was impossible. It was Avery. My fingers trembled. I turned the photograph over. On the back, in faded blue ink, in an elegant looping script, were 2 words. Camilla H. H for Hart. My head spun. Camilla. Santo's sister was Camilla. This baby. "Hey, Agent Hart," I called out. My voice sounded thin, strange, echoing in the hall. She turned, her hand on the door, a polite, professional query on her face. "Miss Caldwell?" I could not speak. I just held out the photograph. She walked back, her brow furrowing in confusion. She looked at the picture. She saw my mother, a stranger, and then she saw the baby. Avery's professional mask did not just slip, it disintegrated. Her face went pale, ashen. She looked at me, then at the photo, her hand coming up to her mouth. She recognized her. She recognized herself. A shaky, confused, and heartbroken smile touched her lips. "We," she whispered, her voice cracking. We might share the same pain." The old woman nodded once, a silent affirmation. She put one frail, dry hand on my arm, squeezed it, and then turned. She slipped out the door and vanished into the night. Santo was at my side. He had seen the exchange. He looked at the photograph in my trembling hand. He looked at Avery's stunned, pale face, and then he looked at me. He did not need to ask. He simply took my hand, the one with the new platinum ring, and squeezed it, his grip a solid, unwavering anchor in the sudden storm. "Family is not just bad blood, Ivy," he said, his voice firm and clear. "It is good choices." I looked down at the impossible photograph, my mother, Camilla, Avery, Santo, me. We were a constellation of broken pieces, of old pain and new hope, tied together by secrets and blood. The first time, in that cold, concrete garage, I had grabbed a stranger and kissed him, just to survive. Now, I looked at the man I loved, at the life we had built from the wreckage, and I knew the truth. Now, I live to protect what is worth kissing. Thank you so much for listening to the story. I am always curious. Where in the world are you listening from? Let me know in the comments below. I would love to connect and hear your thoughts. If you enjoyed this journey, please subscribe to my channel, Mafia Boss Stories, like this video, and give it a huge boost by hitting that hype button. It helps more than you know. Thank you for being here.